Hey everybody, today we're going to be reading chapter 11. Chapter 11 of 2nd Kings. And after I get done reading scripture, I'm going to explain what I think about it, how I feel about it. And I'm not an expert in scripture at all, so please do not lean on my understanding, but trust in the Lord for understanding and for guidance. And if I mispronounce any names, places, people, words, anything like that, I do apologize. And as always, I am reading from my Bible. Since I'm at home, this is the New Living Translation, so the NLT, for those who want to follow along. And without further ado, let's get started. I'm finna mess up names already, Lord. Okay. When Athaliah, the mother of King Ahaziah of Judah, learned that her son was dead, she began to destroy the rest of the royal family. But Ahaziah's sister, Sheba, daughter of King Jehoram, took Ahaziah's infant son, Joash, and stole him away from among the rest of the king's children who were about to be killed. She put Joash and his nurse in a bedroom, and they hid him from Athaliah, so the child was not murdered. Joash remained hidden in the temple of the Lord for 6 years while Ahaziah ruled over the land. In the 7th year of Ahaziah's reign, Jethadiah the priest summoned the commanders, the Cartite mercenaries, and the palace guards to come to the temple of the Lord. He made a solemn pact with them and made them swear an oath of loyalty there in the Lord's temple. Then he showed them the king's son. Jehoiada told them, "This is what you must do. A third of you who are on duty on the Sabbath are to guard the royal palace itself. Another third of you are to stand guard at the Shur gate, and the final third must stand guard behind the palace guard. These 3 groups will all guard the palace. The other 2 units who are off duty on the Sabbath must stand guard for the king at the Lord's temple. Form a bodyguard around the king and keep your weapons in hand. Kill anyone who tries to break through. Stay with the king wherever he goes." So the commanders did everything as Jehoiada the priest ordered. The commanders took charge of the men reporting for duty that Sabbath, as well as those who were going off duty. They brought them all to Jehoiada the priest, and he supplied them with the spears and small shields that had once belonged to King David and were stored in the temple of the Lord. The palace guards stationed themselves around the king with their weapons ready. They formed a line from the south side of the temple around to the north side and all around the altar. Then Jehoiada brought out Joash, the king's son, placed the crown on his head, and presented him with a copy of God's laws. They anointed him and proclaimed him king, and everyone clapped their hands and shouted, "Long live the king." When Ahaziah heard the noise made by the palace guards and the people, she hurried to the Lord's temple to see what was happening. When she arrived, she saw the newly crowned king standing in his place of authority by the pillar, as was the custom at times of coronation. The commanders and trumpeters were surrounding him, and people from all over the land were rejoicing and blowing trumpets. When Athaliah saw all this, she tore her clothes in despair and shouted, "Treason! Treason!" Then Jehoiada the priest ordered the commanders who were in charge of the troops, "Take her to the soldiers in front of the temple and kill anyone who tries to rescue her." For the priest had said she must not be killed in the temple of the Lord. So they seized her and led her out to the gate where horses entered the palace grounds, and she was killed there. Then Jehoiada made a covenant between the Lord and the king and the people that they would be the Lord's people. He also made a covenant between the king and the people, and all the people of the land went over to the temple of Baal and tore it down. They demolished the altars and smashed the idols to pieces, and they killed Matan, the priest of Baal, in front of the altars. Jehoiada the priest stationed guards at the temple of the Lord. Then the commanders, the Kartite mercenaries, the palace guards, and all the people of the land escorted the king from the temple of the Lord. They went through the gate of the guards and into the palace, and the king took his seat on the royal throne. So all the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was peaceful because Ahaziah had been killed at the king's palace. Joash was 7 years old when he became king. Thus ends the reading of chapter 11 of 2 Kings. So I find it interesting that Joash was like that young when he became king. But if he ends up doing what's pleasing in the Lord's sight, then um then I know that the Lord will guide him in everything with ruling. Plus, of course, he'll have like advisors and other people, who will be able to help him rule, so it's always concerning, in all honesty, when like a young child ends up becoming um the new ruler, of a land. Um because they're not they're not old enough yet in order to really make decisions, so they rely heavily on their advisors for advice. And some people like to use that as an opportunity to make the king a puppet king, and they're the actual ones with the power and who make the decisions and stuff like that. So you got to be careful when it come down to that. So but this is Jerusalem, that we talking about. This is Israel, and stuff. So the Lord obviously is at work here, and the Lord will be to um, to guide Joash with ruling the people of Israel. So I do not know. I don't know why I don't know why family members gotta be so evil. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just don't understand it. I understand that if you're born into like a toxic family or whatever, like, I do understand that the Lord put you in that situation because there are lessons that you have to learn, and you can only learn them by experiencing that. Like, you know how like our faith is tested, when the Lord, puts us in, difficult situations, to test our faith, the trial by fire and everything. You know, like you have to go through something in order to see, in order to learn lessons and stuff. It's just like, growing up and everything. Like, your parents can only tell you so much. Sometimes you got to experience things for yourself in order for you to really, like learn the lesson. Like if your parents tell you, hey, don't touch that stove because it's hot, you're not really going to learn that lesson until you touch the stove and you burn your fingers because it was hot. I mean, some children, they learn, after you tell them, they don't have to learn the hard way, but a lot of us got to learn the hard way. Um, but yeah, when the Lord wants to teach, his children a lesson, when the Lord wants to, you know, um, discipline us or train us up, to fulfill our calling, our purpose one day, we literally have to be put in situations where we learn those lessons. Like if the Lord wants you to recognize what, behaviors are considered toxic and how to best address and deal with that, if you're going to need those life lessons and everything in order for you to fulfill your calling, then it makes sense for Him to, have you born into a toxic family. So that way you can learn early, you know, um, you can learn early those lessons. And I think that the reason why he does that as well is because certain toxic behaviors, it takes a long time in order for you to recognize them, like manipulation and stuff, and how narcissistic behavior and everything. So it takes a long time to recognize this stuff. Because a lot of people are master manipulators, masters at controlling people and stuff, masters at making it seem like, their concern is genuine concern when in actuality it's not. It's just a form of manipulation that they use, you know, like, but they mask it behind concern, you know, like toxic people often mask, their toxic behaviors behind, ones that seem genuine and that seem like loving, like they care, but they don't. Um, so like sometimes you got to be put in certain situations in order to learn certain lessons, and and that that is what Joash had to learn in this. Like he was born to a family who did not do what was pleasing in the Lord's sight, or at least his direct family members and stuff didn't. You know, I mean, shoot, the start of his life, shoot, as an infant and everything, literally had to be hidden away and everything, in the Lord's temple and stuff, in order to um hide from his grandma. I don't know. I'm reading. I'm looking at these names. Basically, he had to hide from one of his relatives. I'm not gonna say whether or not it was his grandma or not. I don't know, but I know it was one of his relatives though. The queen basically who was killing off the royal family and stuff, killing off members of the royal family, killing all the king's children and stuff, so that way she can rule and be queen, which is messed up. I mean, why would you kill off your son's children? I I don't know, just evil stuff. Basically, he was on the run as an infant, and he was an infant, couldn't even do the running. You know what I'm saying? He wasn't even old enough yet to do the running. But he was in a toxic situation already had to be hid inside of the Lord's temple for 6 years, you know. And then when he became 7 years old and everything, had to be surrounded and stuff like that by guards and stuff to protect him and everything while he's being, crowned king and stuff. And now he got to rule the kingdom and stuff at the age 7. Like, that's a lot of pressure and stuff for a child to have, at age 7. Shoot, I'm not even gonna lie to you. I remember when I was 7 years old, I had a lot of pressure on me too. At 7, um, I took care of my brother, took care of my mom. Um, I had to be mature at a young age, so you know, I had to be the parent, even though I was a child. So, I understand. I understand. But yeah, it's a lot. But Joash obviously had to go through this so that way he could learn some lessons. Um, I'm not exactly sure what lessons he had to learn, but I do wonder what it was like to be raised up inside of the temple of the Lord. He was probably raised up in the ways of the Lord, like, the priests there and stuff like that, probably raised him up in the ways of the Lord, you know. Just like how parents are supposed to raise their children, in the ways of the Lord and stuff, or supposed to teach them about the Bible and everything, are supposed to, make sure that all of their actions and stuff like that, is righteous and everything, that they do what is pleasing to God. So that's probably what he was doing while he was being raised in the temple of the Lord by the priest and whoever else he was raised by. So I feel strongly that Joash is gonna do what's pleasing in the Lord's sight. It would be surprising to me if he didn't, because I'd be like, what happened? Like like he was raised up in the temple of the Lord for 7 years. Like, what happened? Until he was crowned king. Like, what happened? Like, what happened after he was crowned king to where he just all of a sudden ain't doing what's pleasing in the Lord's sight? Because, I mean, we had a good foundation. Like, but yeah, we'll see in the next chapter, though. But I really do feel like he going to do what's pleasing in the Lord's sight, because I don't see how he wouldn't. I really don't see how he wouldn't. And we do have to give our credit. We do have to give our credit to to um to the woman who saved Joash. That was one of his relatives too. One of his relatives saved him, and hid him away, in the temple of the Lord. So she was his nurse. I don't know. Relative, nurse, both. It don't matter. But yeah, we gotta give her props for saving him. Cause yeah, basically a coup was happening, and she saved him as an infant. Took him to the temple of the Lord um for him to be hidden. So yep, that's all I gotta say about this chapter. The Lord, He places us in certain situations, um, not to harm us, but to teach us lessons, for us to grow. That character development. You know what I'm saying? Like, we need all of these lessons, um, for our purpose, for our calling, and everything. Cause you don't wanna, He's not gonna have us begin our calling, our purpose, and stuff until we've been properly trained. We need to be trained. We need to be ready, for whatever it is that He has planned for us. And we cannot be ready for that until, He's properly trained us. So, whatever situation and everything that you're going through, He's training you, you know. Now, if you're already walking in your calling and your purpose and stuff like that, should continue to lean on the Lord and stuff and pray to him and everything. Remember those lessons that he taught you while you was in training and stuff. Don't forget. And just continue to lean on the Lord. I mean, I don't know what else advice to give for those who are already walking in their calling and their purpose, because um I'm still going through training, obviously. But I'm being obedient and being consistent, you know, working on my discipline, self-control, all of that stuff. So the Lord's still working on me. But for those, who are already in their calling and stuff like that, in their purpose, just continue to lean on the Lord. He got you. Continue to consult Him, continue to be obedient and consistent, and discipline, and exercising self-control and stuff. Just continue to utilize those skills and stuff that you learned while you were in training. Continue to um, seek the Lord like you did when you were training, in the beginning. Like, just continue those good habits that you learned and developed and stuff like that while you were in training. Just continue to do what you've been doing, you know? And don't forget them lessons that you learned. Please don't forget them lessons that you learned, because you probably went through some suffering in order to learn them lessons. And we don't want to forget them lessons, because we don't want to go through that stuff again. We don't want to suffer again. So, don't forget when you get out there. Or if you are already out there, don't forget. That's why journaling is important as well. Having a spiritual journal or whatever, where you write down stuff like that. That way you won't forget. You can always go back and read your journal every now and then and refresh yourself on them lessons that you learned. Because I know that I grew up in a toxic family, and I know that all of those lessons that I learned in my youth from going through all of that, I thank the Lord that I learned them young. Because them would be some hard lessons to try and learn right now, at my age right now. Like, I would not want to go through all of that in my in my young adult years. I would not want to go through all that. So I'm glad I learned all my lessons young, and now I'm just you know how, like, when you were a kid and you see some stuff that you just know ain't right, but then because you were a kid and everything, the adults want to make it seem like you crazy when you not, and they know that you not, but they taking advantage of the fact that you a kid, and they feel like you don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, I just love how now as an adult, like, they can't hide that stuff from me. They can't tell me that I'm crazy, because I know I'm not. Especially since I'm literally in college getting a master's degree, and like, what I study and everything, literally, like literally I study human behavior. Like you literally cannot tell me that I'm crazy, because I know I'm not. You just in denial at this point, or you trying your best in order to try and convince me that I'm wrong when I know I'm not. Like, I love how when you an adult, all of that stuff that they did to you and everything, it come to the light. Like, I just love that. And then I love how they can't control you no more. They can't manipulate you no more. You see all of that, when you an adult. You see all of that. Now, the true test is what is, okay, because the Lord can reveal to you everything that they doing to you. But the true test is walking away. That's the true test. It's your decision. Like, what are you gonna do with this information? You gonna continue to, deal with them and their toxic behavior and stuff, or are you gonna walk away? That's the true test. Because a lot of people, they recognize the dysfunction, they recognize the toxicity, they recognize all of that, but not a lot of people ain't able to get out of it, and it's because, well, some people literally choose not to. They choose to just stay in it and continue to deal with it because they're just so used to it at this point, you know. Other people, they try to escape, but because they want out, but they sadly don't make it out because they were killed or whatever happened, you know. Um, because that does happen in life, you know. Unfortunately, you know, that's really is really sad. I really don't like it when that happens, you know. It's just like a woman that's a part of an abusive relationship, or a man, or a man that's a part of a abusive relationship and stuff, and they want out, you know, and they try and leave, and they don't make it out with their life, and it's just really sad when that happens. And then there are those of us who do make it out with our life, but yeah, when you want to leave, it's one or two ways. You either make it out with your life or you don't. But either way, you do make it out in a sense. I just don't like it when you lose, when you know, when you do lose your life. It's sad because it means that that person just literally could not handle you leaving. You know, to like they took it to that extreme. You know, like they didn't want you to be happy with anyone else, and it's just really unfortunate. I pray that the Lord blesses everyone who wants to get out of toxic relationships to be able to leave and make it out with their life, because you know losing their life just really, it's just not fair. But yeah, um the good thing is though is that when you do make it out, you free and you ain't got to deal with them no more. So yep, the real test is always what you're gonna do with the information that you have been given. That's always the real test. It's just like followers of Christ and everything. You read the Bible, you know the Lord's character, you know what he commands us to do. Now that you know what you're supposed to do and you understand that and stuff and you know how to put it into practice, you know, you have to decide whether or not you're going to do that or not. So, I don't know about y'all, but as for me and my house, and by my house, I mean my future house, obviously. You know, when I marry one day, have children and stuff. As for me and my house, we gonna serve the Lord, and with whatever information the Lord gives us and everything, we gonna take that and we gonna live a righteous life. We gonna do what we need to do. We gonna obey the Lord. Yeah, we gonna obey the Lord. And if we ever deal with toxic people or whatever, we'll handle it accordingly. You know how the Lord want us to handle it. Because sometimes you got to deal with toxic people for a time. You just got to endure and deal with it for a little minute, you know. Because the Lord be trying to, show them, be trying to reveal himself, through you, whatever. You know that saying that sometimes you are the only Jesus that they'll see. Yeah, basically that, you know. So the Lord might have you dealing with it for a time so that way you can plant, the seeds that you need to plant and all that, you know. So you can deliver the message that need to be delivered to them or whatever so they can see an example of a true, real Christian, who is following Christ and stuff. I mean, so they can experience what true love is or, whatever it is, you know. He might have you deal with them for a time. Or he might have you cut them off immediately. Who knows? Well, only the Lord knows. That's why I say, when you're dealing with toxic people, always consult the Lord on what it is he wants you to do. Because, you know, He might have you leave him alone. He might have you deal with him for a little minute. You know, it all depends. But yep, this chapter just got me thinking about poor Joash and how he had it rough growing up. Had it rough growing up. It just reminded me of my childhood a bit. I'm also reminded of Joseph. Y'all know my boy Joseph and everything. Whose brothers was jealous of him and everything because he had because the Lord was giving him dreams. Dreams of the future. And his brothers was jealous of him. Also because he was, their dad's favorite, because he had the colorful robe and everything. So, yeah, his brothers basically threw him in a cistern and or in a pit. I can't remember. I think it was a cistern. And then he got sold into slavery. So yeah, his brothers sold him into slavery and stuff. And Joseph ended up living. He ended up living in Egypt. The land of which he a stranger in. That's not the land of his birth. And yeah, he ended up getting falsely accused. A woman falsely accused him of rape because he wouldn't sleep with her like she wanted. And he ended up getting thrown in jail by the woman's husband. And he ended up having to be in jail. And yeah, it was just a lot. My boy Joseph, he went through a lot. He went through a lot. But everything that he went through though was to teach him lessons. It was preparing him for his calling, for his future. He ended up interpreting Pharaoh's dream and ended up becoming the second most powerful man of Egypt. And because of Joseph's interpretation of the dream and everything and the plan and stuff that the Lord gave him, in which for them to survive throughout the famine, Joseph was put in charge of that. And he ended up saving everybody from the 7 years of famine. And he saved not only the people of Egypt and stuff, but other people as well from other places, including his own family, who sold him into slavery, including his brothers and stuff. So, we all go through things for a reason. Every single last aspect of our life, everything that we went through and stuff, we all went through it for a reason. Yep, the devil intended it for evil, but the Lord intends it for good. So, that's it. That's all I gotta say. Thank y'all so much for listening. I love you. Jesus loves you. And have a blessed day. Bye.